I want to hear cannons. Downfield, pull up, ball to the 5, touchdown Tampa Bay. Mike Evans does it again. Fire the cannons, Bucs.
It's first and goal. That's picked off. That's picked off. And who else? Rondé Barber. And the Tampa Bay Buccaneers may ride to the Super Bowl with that one.
Third down, 18. Dropping Gannon, looking Gannon. Those up with the head. Intercepted. 30. Derek Brooks 30. Brooks to the 25. 20. Derek Brooks all the way. There it is. The dagger's in. We're going to win the Super Bowl. And there the cannons go. Fire them. Keep on firing them. Keep on firing them.
Hello and welcome back, Bucs fans, to a brand new edition of the Cannon Fire podcast. It is time once again for the season review show. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers 2024 season is in the books, and they have plenty of high and lows from this season that we're going to recap here over the next hour or so. Welcome back to the Cannon Fire podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthew, joined alongside me as always, my good buddy and co-host from BucsNation.com, Evan Wanish. Today we have got quite a bit to unpack, my friend. The Buccaneers essentially right back where they were a year ago. A little bit of improvement with a 10-7 regular season record. They notch one more win than they did in 2023. They get their fourth straight NFC South Division title. They get their fifth straight playoff appearance, which is a franchise record. 3 straight playoff appearances with head coach Todd Bowles. They also get a first-round exit to rookie quarterback Jaden Daniels and the Washington Commanders in the wild card round. So, again, I re-emphasize my point. In regards to the outlook and ultimately the head coach conversation, the Buccaneers are right back where they were a year ago. I think fans are more divided than ever when it comes to the future of the Buccaneers and the head coach position, and specifically Todd Bowles. I'd say for some fans, their opinion of the head coach may go hand in hand with their opinion of the season as a whole. And I think the question that we're going to try and answer, or at least offer our opinions on today on the show, is have the Bucs hit a ceiling with Todd Bowles? Evan, I say all of that to ask you this. How are you doing? And are you ready to recap this season for the Buccaneers?
Yeah, doing good. Our first pod in like the off season, pretty much, because we did not our first video. We did obviously the best and worst after the game. This is our first official podcast heading into the 2025 off season, and it's going to be a lot to cover, right? There's going to be a lot of things, that have to cover, maybe even shortly, right? Because partly one of the reasons that the Buccaneers got to 10 wins was they had a great offense, right? And with a great offense comes interest in your offensive coordinator. So Liam Coen obviously took an interview with the Jaguars. There sounds like there is a lot, like legitimate interest from Jacksonville there. It sounds like he's pretty high up on their list. So we'll see. We may have news about Liam Coen maybe. So we might be talking to you guys pretty shortly here. But yeah, obviously, like you said, a lot to unpack here. Going to be reviewing the season, and then a little bit later taking a look at some things that I think are hot topics nowadays, like Liam Coen, Todd Bowles, a couple things with players and stuff. But I think a lot of people right now I honestly think their main focus, right, and their main worry is potentially losing Liam Coen and losing an offensive coordinator for the second straight year to a head coaching job, not really having that continuity, right, that stability, especially when Coen was so good for the Buccaneers. So there's some people that are of the opinion that the Buccaneers should and will do whatever it takes to keep Liam Coen in Tampa Bay, including maybe a head coaching change. That there's some people that think that, look, like, Todd Bowles is going to be here. Whatever happens with Coen's going to happen. So we'll see. Time will tell. I wouldn't be ruling out either one. Like I said, we'll get into that discussion a little bit deeper as the show goes on. But a lot to unpack today.
Yeah, drawing some more parallels back to that 2023 season. The Buccaneers came out of that season with an extra playoff win, but also one of the up-and-coming offensive coordinators in the NFL who had a couple of head coach interviews, and Carolina ended up taking him as the man for the job. Now, for Liam Coen, before we dive into it, we'll close the show with some of those heavy-hitting topics. We're going to get into the season review first and foremost, but we can say with Liam Coen, as of right now, the outlook seems to be Jacksonville is the only position that he is interviewed for. Now, it seems like things are going well, but I would say as of right now, for people holding out hope, the two most likely destinations for Liam Coen, as of today, as of the recording of this podcast on January 20th, it seems like he's either going to be the next head coach for Jacksonville or he'll be back on Todd Bowles' staff in 2025, hopefully.
Well, there's three outcomes, right? I think he's
that's fair.
the next head coach of the Jaguars, he is the offensive coordinator for the Buccaneers, or he is the next head coach of the Buccaneers. So we'll say but at this point, with you only interviewing in one spot, it's pretty late in the game for a team like maybe the Raiders, right? I know that John Spytek interview with the Raiders. There's a lot of interest, I think, on the Raiders side of things in Spytek, and the Bucs got some good news on that though, because the Titans had also interviewed Spytek, and they ended up going with Mike Borgonzi from the Chiefs. So Spytek does not get that job, but he still could get that Raiders job. I know some people were maybe worried that if Spytek got the Raiders job, would he try and take Coen? At this point in the game, though, this late, without even interviewing Coen, I would say you're probably not going to be hiring him. So I think there's three outcomes here, right? Whether it's Liam Coen returning as the offensive coordinator of the Bucs, Liam Coen becoming the head coach of the Jaguars, or the Buccaneers saying, yeah, we just simply cannot lose this guy and making him the next head coach of the Bucs. So we'll see.
We've thrown this stat around a lot, but this season, the Buccaneers became the first team in NFL history to complete 70% or more of their passes and rush for at least 5 yards per carry in the same year. The rebirth of the run game, all-time efficiency statistics here for the Buccaneers offense. I mean, really the most efficient offense in Buccaneers franchise history for sure, but among there with, the NFL greats. You got to credit that to Liam Coen, and I think that just puts into perspective the impact he's had year one on this Buccaneers offense. And, of course, we'll dive into that more later when we talk about the top playmakers on both sides of the football. The defense, same conversation as last year. Largely inconsistent, I would say this year, more so than last year. They were just riddled with injuries. Some of that blame falls on Todd Bowles, some of it deservedly so, but a lot of people believe it is enough to call for his job, or at the very least, a rearranging of that defensive coaching staff. Maybe something to consider, but Todd Bowles has definitely defended his guys at the podium since that last game in the wild card round for the Buccaneers. People want to call for his job. You talked about the possibility where Liam Coen ends up being the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So his potential departure is potentially playing a factor here too in the ultimate decision for the Glazers, Jason Light, and the rest of the Buccaneers organization here at the fate of Todd Bowles. But Evan, let's get into the season here. This is what we are here for. We will wrap it up with those topics. We will address some people in chat, so make sure you drop your takes. And excited to have you guys follow along here as we dive in. The Buccaneers start their season 3-1. The Bucs are no strangers to hot starts under Todd Bowles as well. They have been in this situation before, starting their season 3-1 in the past, 2023 season. But those 3 wins early on in the year, the quality of those wins felt like they just felt like they meant more than wins in the early window in seasons past, especially with Todd Bowles as head coach. It was a hot start. Those 3 wins that they had. Washington week 1, 37-20. It's an impressive win. I know it can be looked at as like week 1 always kind of has those big surprising upsets, and it's the week 1 jitters. It is what it is. But the Bucs still held one of the better scoring offenses in the NFL this season to under 23 points each time they played. And, I think this win, regardless of it being week 1, looks better every single week. In case you haven't seen it, the Washington Commanders and a rookie quarterback, Jaden Daniels, are headed to the NFC Championship game after knocking off the Lions, who the Buccaneers beat in week 2. Another win that I think, despite the Lions kind of being a disappointment there after nabbing the 1 seed, they were a good team in the regular season. Bucs beat them 20-16. It is a gritty game. They do it without Luke Gedeke. Aiden Hutchinson is kicking ass in that first half. And honestly, in years past, even like 2022 with Tom Brady, that started out feeling like a game that they weren't going to win.
Mm-hmm.
And they ended up winning. Very impressive win. One of their more impressive wins on the season. Philadelphia week 4, 33-16. Absolutely manhandled them. It was one of the early displays of really what this offense is capable of. I know they scored more points in week 1, but there were more miscues in week 1, I would argue. Manhandled Philly. Smoother, one of the smoother offensive days on the season. Legit wins when you consider where all of these teams ended up in the long run. Philly about to play in the NFC Championship game. These are wins that made you feel like, in my opinion, it made me feel like the Bucs had turned a corner, and when they are at their best, they can beat anyone. Now, the elephant in the room, obviously, in this 3-1 start is the loss to Denver in week 3. This is where they tap that ceiling that we talk about with Todd Bowles, and I'm curious to get your take. It was one of those losses that showed you the cracks that were going to continuously hold them back all year, and I think that's what made it so disappointing, with it being right in the middle of all of these really impressive wins for Tampa Bay to start the year. It felt like they really had the ball rolling. And then again, we talk about tapping the ceiling. Your thoughts here on the first quarter of the year?
So it's interesting. All three of the teams that the Buccaneers beat just played this past weekend. You were able to see all three of those teams. Obviously, Detroit having a disappointing ending, Washington being the surprise team, right? That I think I think most people thought there was a good chance Philly would end up in the NFC title game, but Washington, I don't think many predicted that. I mean, especially at the start of the season, right? Because I think you expected Detroit to be pretty darn good after going to the NFC title game last year. You expected Philly to probably be pretty good, but Washington, the Bucs were favored in that Week 1 game, right? Like that was, you didn't really know what to expect. They just gone at 4-13, have a rookie quarterback, have a new head coach, so who knows? And Dan Quinn has got those boys playing, so it is interesting. We talk about the blemish, right? When with the Denver loss. All four of those games, those are 4 playoff teams. All 4 of those teams have made the playoffs. So, when you're looking at it, I think the Denver loss actually looks a little bit better because Denver was 0-2 at the time, right? When they came to Tampa, and the loss in context makes it bad, right? Makes it feel worse. 26-7, not really competitive from the jump, right? But it turns out Denver was actually a quality football team this year. So I think, there are wins that look a little less impressive. Chargers game, maybe, right? Because of how the Chargers went out. But then I think there are losses that look a little less damning, I guess you could say. Because, like I said, at the time that, man, losing to the Broncos at home and this and that with a rookie quarterback, and he was struggling. But it turns out the Broncos, were a quality football team. So it is interesting looking back on it, seeing that they played their first 4 games were against playoff teams, and they fared pretty well going 3-1.
Absolutely. And there were a couple of stretches here that we had looked at when the schedule had dropped before the season, and we're like, this is going to be a really, really tough stretch. We're about to dive into that stretch right now. They start 3-1. The overtime loss on Thursday Night Football to Kirk Cousins, that was, I think, what exposed the Buccaneers secondary,
to me,
poor tackling.
I want to talk about that game.
Yeah,
we're not going to talk about too many individual games as much, but I want to talk about that because that's what you talk about. When you talk about tapping the ceiling.
It showed the entire country what the Buccaneers defense was capable of this season, for sure.
When you talk about tapping the ceiling, right? To me, it's not so much the Denver game. To me, it's that Atlanta game. You beat Philly. You're 3-1. You're up against Atlanta in Atlanta. You can go to 4-1, right? Which is something the Buccaneers in 2023 did not do. They had a 3-1 start, but they didn't go to 4-1. That's that ceiling, right? And what is that ceiling? Is that ceiling limited? That's the type of thing. You had it in your hands, right? You were able to go 4-1. You couldn't get it done. That's the type of thing that has me questioning the ceiling of a Todd Bowles-led team. Now, to be completely fair, we talked about this I remember because it was a storyline. It was very hot in that Eagles game. And I'm not making excuses. These are professional football players. They go out there. They get paid to play. But this was a team, in particular, a defense that looked like they had just played in 100-degree heat 4 days earlier. They looked wore down. The game went to overtime, and they ended up losing. Kirk Cousins throws for freaking 500 yards, an inexcusable defensive performance, and that's the type of loss that limits, questions the ceiling, but also puts a lot of heat on Todd Bowles. Because this is, while yes, the injuries on defense matter, but you're playing with what you got. And this is your defense, right? And you're in control of that defense. and they simply were not good enough against the Kirk Cousins who ended up getting benched later on in the season. It's not like he was doing that to every other team. He was really just doing it to you.
Yeah, the only two games, I think the two best games that he had this season before getting benched were both against Tampa Bay. He was strong through the air in both of those games. But the shortcomings of the Buccaneers defense this season, I think the injuries are ultimately what buys Todd another year. I think that is why maybe the sense of urgency isn't as high as some people would like when it comes to firing him, bringing in Liam Coen. I don't think it plays out that way. I still think we both agree that the most likely scenario is that Bowles is back. Promising sign with the interview cycle going the way that it has for Liam Coen as well, but that's irrelevant as of right now. The shortcomings of the defense this year. I don't know. Tricky conversation. We will get to that, but they lose on Thursday Night Football, in overtime, and then they beat the Saints. You go out, you bounce back after a tough division loss, you hang 51 points on a division opponent. That's a feel-good win. At the time, it is one of the best days on the ground that they have had in a very long time. I don't think they've run that much on any team since Doug Martin did it against the Raiders in 2012, and he had 200 plus. So after that game, a productive game, 51 points. You feel great about it. Again, another great showing for the offense. That was a game that really, we talk about previous years where I feel like they lose. I don't know if that's a game where I feel like they lose it in previous years, but they sure as shit don't score 51 points by the end of it. Because you remember in the second quarter of that game, that was like the stretch of the season where every second quarter was just a nightmare for Tampa Bay. They could not get out of their own way. And that's where some of the execution errors started to creep in. Now, I know that there were phantom interceptions with Baker Mayfield. That always seems to happen against New Orleans at one time or another, which is interesting, no matter who's a quarterback. But regardless of that game going the way that it did, they proceed to lose 4 straight. And for the 3rd straight year, they are 10 games into the season with a 4-6 record. For the 3rd straight year, Evan, the Bucs were staring down a 4-6 record in a position to win the division and make the postseason if they played damn near perfect football down the stretch. Now, they ultimately go 10-6. We know the story. Or 6-1 down the stretch to get to 10-7. We know the story. We'll get to that in a minute. But let me get your thoughts on this just brutal stretch of the schedule for Tampa Bay. A stretch that we had talked about before the season, games like San Fran and Kansas City being some of the toughest all year.
And the thing is, San Francisco wasn't even as tough as we imagined, right? I mean, we expected San Francisco to be one of the best teams in the entire NFL. That wasn't the case, right? Even Kansas City, their record was really good, but they weren't really beating teams, convincingly. The Bucs took them to overtime, and I think you looked at it and it was, Baltimore, Atlanta, Kansas City, San Francisco. That's a tough 4-game stretch. Bucs end up losing all 4 of them, including getting swept by Atlanta, which at that point, I had basically declared that the only way the Buccaneers were going to make the playoffs was at a wild card. I couldn't really see a world where the Bucs got swept by Atlanta and still were able to win the division. That would have been so tough to overcome, and they would have needed a very similar stretch that they did in 2023, which that's tough to do every single year, right? And that's something where I think some fans, when you're talking about Bowles' future, what if you find yourself in that scenario in 2025? Like, are you just going to have to rely on just getting so hot in November, in the end of November, and then into December, and have to go 5-1 and 6-1 down the stretch in order to make the playoffs? That's not sustainable. That's just so. But really quick, in the Baltimore game, they lose Mike Evans. But then the bigger one is they lose Chris Godwin. They lose Chris Godwin for the season. That's the big one there, right? So then you're playing Atlanta, Kansas City, and San Francisco all without Mike Evans and Chris Godwin, and it shows, right? The offense was decent. It was okay. It held its own. But it wasn't the same, right? You don't have that firepower, and they end up losing all 4 of those games. And like you said, dropping to what like well below multiple games below 500. And yeah, your season is basically on the brink. To where yeah, you have to play. I mean, really, you had to play like you said, darn near perfect football in the final month and a half of the season for the second straight season.
And I think this also factors into something you had said earlier when you mentioned how many times was this team in a position where it was right there in front of them and all they needed to do was just get it done, and they didn't get it done, or they delayed it for another week in a row. I mean, they had one hell of a win streak, but unlike the 2023 season, they were relying on Atlanta to kind of fumble the lead. Atlanta was in a cush position. Atlanta fumbled the bag, arguably harder than the Bucs did, coming up short at times this season. When you think about the lead that they had on the NFC South at one point this year. But I mean, time and time again, the Bucs felt like they were right there. They controlled their own destiny. This week is going to be the week where they win the game. They put themselves in a comfortable position to relax down the stretch, win the division, make the postseason, help their seeding. It was interesting because the way that the wild card situation played out, the loss to Dallas and getting swept by Atlanta, like it ultimately didn't change things very much. There was still a scenario where the Bucs could have swept Atlanta and beat Dallas and still ended up the 3 seed. So it is what it is. But the fact of the matter is, as a head coach, when you're evaluating this stuff and you're evaluating the situations that he puts his team in, time and time again, it feels like the Bucs are right there and then they just come up short. And like, is that the standard for Todd Bowles? Is Todd Bowles going to be your head coach every year who starts out great and then ends up 4-6, and then it's kind of a roll of the dice after that because this year you're relying on other teams. That's not going to happen every year, especially if Michael Penix ends up being the real deal and the Saints hire a competent head coach here. Yeah,
that's a big key, right? And again, I understand the Buccaneers went 6-1 down the stretch. They took care of business. Okay, they deserve what they deserve some praise there.
Yeah, one hell of a win streak. Not to discredit that at all.
Yeah, but they got some help. like they received some help from the Atlanta Falcons. After the Falcons beat the Buccaneers, the Falcons then beat the Cowboys. And things were looking dire at that point. But then the Falcons lose to the Saints, they lose to the Broncos, they lose to the Chargers, they lose to the Vikings. They lose 4 straight themselves. Then they end up beating the Raiders, they end up beating the Giants, but then they lose their last 2 games of the season. So yeah, like the Bucs, it was impressive, right? Going 6-1 down the stretch. I'm not taking anything away, but like you said, they needed help. Like if Atlanta even goes 2-2 instead of 0-4 in that stretch, and let's say they win one of those games against the Commanders or the Panthers, the Bucs probably aren't making the playoffs regardless of going 6-1 down the stretch. So that's where you want to be in control of your own destiny, and really for the second year in a row, the Bucs haven't, and I think that's the frustrating thing for the Bucs with with Todd Bowles at the helm and I understand it's not all on him. It's just like it's not 100% on the players. It's not 100% on the coaches. It's a combined effort. But I think that's where the frustration comes in. Is are you going to be able to do that every year, especially with the good points you made? What if Michael Penix is just simply better than Kirk Cousins? Like if Michael Penix plays better than Kirk Cousins in some of those games, the Falcons win some of those games. So if he's good, right?
If Michael Penix plays better than Kirk Cousins against the Bucs, he's throwing for 600 yards on the day.
And then the Carolina Panthers. I mean, I think the Saints have a long road ahead of them. So, I mean, even if they get the head coaching hire right, I view that team as a team that's probably not going to be much of a threat to win the division. But the Carolina Panthers, I mean, they were playing the second best football out of all the teams in the month of December. The Bucs should have lost to them the first time that they played. I mean, Carolina could be a team. What if Bryce Young is, what if that wasn't just a hot month or whatever? What if he is actually, showing like a number 1 overall pick? Then the Panthers become a viable threat. So yeah, you can only rely on help for so long. So yeah, you started the season off strong. That's good. You've ended the season strong. That's good. But you'd like your middle to be a little bit more consistent.
Diving into this win streak for Tampa Bay, coming out of the bye week, they go on an absolute tear, 6-1 to end their season, 10-7. They capture the NFC South crown from Atlanta, who again they relied on to misstep in the final few weeks of the season, and they make their 5th straight trip to the postseason, which is a franchise record. The most impressive win in that win streak, I would say, the Bucs at least, or in the games that they won after the bye week, excuse me. It was the game in week 15. Yeah, week 15, they were on the road. They played LA. They beat the Chargers 40-17. They got their 4th straight win at the time. It was their longest win streak of the season. I think that this was an impressive win for a couple of reasons, but, the Buccaneers defense, we've talked a lot about their shortcomings this season. I think we have to give them credit in games where they stepped up. This game, they absolutely stepped up. Todd Bowles showed in a lot of those games that they won after the bye week that he is one of the better coaches in the NFL at making adjustments, to be completely honest with you. I know that we talk about the shortcomings, we talk about the injuries, and I think that factors into a lot of why they weren't able to do what they wanted to do. The depth just wasn't strong. Guys couldn't tackle. Execution on the field was terrible at times. But when they stepped up and Bowles made adjustments, I mean, he was limiting a lot of these teams in the second half of these games. The numbers were proving that the Bucs were playing damn good ball in the second half of those games. But in this game in particular, against the Chargers, I would say this was the most impressive win of that run because they forced a couple of key takeaways from Justin Herbert, who before this game had thrown less than, I think, 3 interceptions all year long, maybe less than 2 interceptions all year, headed into that game. Mm-hmm. The Buccaneers offense was explosive against the Chargers defense that really ranked pretty well among NFL standards headed into that game. I remember that was the big question was, hey, after the bye week, all these matchups for the Bucs are pretty favorable. The Chargers are a playoff team, and I know they ended up becoming what they became, but at the time, they were still a formidable team in the AFC where it is tough to make the postseason and a very tough division for themselves as well. Justin Herbert was playing clean football, taking care of the football, so the question was, can the Buccaneers, beat these guys who rank pretty well, and I thought they did. That 26-24 loss to Dallas in Week 16, though, came down to a lot of things, but I think it also highlighted the Buccaneers' struggles on primetime in this regular season. They went 0-4 in the regular season, 0-1 in the playoffs. So 0-5 in primetime in 2024. Todd Bowles said they should make every single game a 1 o'clock game. I agree wholeheartedly. But a very strong finish to the 24 season before the playoffs here for the Bucs. Evan, your thoughts on this stretch?
Yeah, I mean, look, you talk about the Chargers win, you overcome a lot in that game on the road, right, against a playoff team. So, I mean, that was obviously a big key there. And then you play teams that, look, I mean, you should beat, right? You should beat the Giants. You should beat the Raiders. You should beat the Panthers.
Should have beat the Cowboys. That was
I mean,
a Cowboys team
and again,
beat.
That's where we're talking about the ceiling, right? And when you have questions about that ceiling, all right, well, you're almost able to break through it, but hang on, because then when they lost to the Cowboys, they needed help. They needed the Commanders to beat the Falcons for the Bucs to be back in full control. So again, it's they could have the Bucs at that point before that game against Dallas, the Bucs controlled their own destiny. They win 3 straight. They win the NFC South. I know, easier said than done. When that would have been them winning their last 7 games of the season. That's difficult.
That's tough for any team to do. Yeah.
Yes. But at the same time, all right, you had control, and then you lost that game, so you gave the control away, and then again, you needed other help. And how sustainable is that year after year? How many times are you going to get help like that? It's not going to happen every single time. So again, I think that's where fans are worried about. Well, if you start the season in a ditch, are you going to be able to dig your way out enough with your good play, but then also getting the help that you need from the other teams? So. I mean that's a game you should have won, and then Carolina, you go out there in the second time and you dominate, right? I mean that's one of the more impressive wins I think the Bucs had on both sides of the ball all year. When we're not talking about just the opponent quality, I think they really showed out there. And then the New Orleans game, right? And you were talking about the end stretch there wasn't pretty, and it looked like it was almost going to be a loss at times, right? But the Buccaneers were able to, again, the defense steps up in the second half, right? In the second half of that Chargers game, the defense pitched a shutout. So yeah, I mean that's a big reason, and kudos. We've criticized the defense plenty, right? Even on this very show a couple minutes ago, we were talking about the defense, but credit to Todd Bowles there. The defense in the second half of the season, yes, It helps when you're playing not so great offenses, but they did play some offenses that were playing well, right? The Chargers, I mean, Bryce Young and the Panthers were playing good football, and the Buccaneers were able to in the second half particularly, they were able to really shut down what opposing offenses were trying to do. So that was a big key in their win streak there, and then that obviously propelled them to a an NFC South title.
The Buccaneers win the NFC South. They get a home playoff game, and they go into the NFL postseason as the 3 seed in the NFC. They have a wild card weekend game against the Washington Commanders, a Week 1 rematch with rookie quarterback Jalen Daniels. And we won't dive into it too much, but
Yeah.
man, before this game, I did a segment with FanDuel Radio and Andrew Felponi over there, and I had explained to him before we knew who the Bucs opponent was going to be. He said, rank the possible opponents in, who you want them to face, who you least want them to face. And at the time, it was Minnesota, Detroit, Washington. I did not want to see Jayden Daniels. I know he's a rookie, but holy hell. I mean, again, every single week, that game against the Lions, he looks like a guy who is so good at everything. And now he is the first rookie quarterback to make the conference championship game in 20 years. I think one of only 2 in NFL history to have done it. So
It's crazy.
yeah.
I mean, and I mean, look, and he played well against Tampa. He played even better against Detroit. I mean, it's appearing to be the real deal. But yeah, that's the Buccaneers. The Buccaneers drew, that Washington team as the 3 seed, and it was and again, we're not really going to talk about that game too much, right? That was the most recently. If you want to set our full thoughts from that game, you can go check out the recap show. But I mean, that was a game. Look, the Bucs had an opportunity, right? They had an opportunity to win, and they had multiple opportunities, and it wasn't just one particular thing. I don't think, and it was both sides of the ball too. Like the offense, with the turnover or whatever, and that was the only turnover of the game for either side. Ended up being a pretty big one. At the same time, defense doesn't force a punt, so I think it's a loss that you can pin on both sides. I think.
Yeah, I had seen it described as death by 1,000 paper cuts when it comes to the Buccaneers defense. Just simply could not get off of the field, and it made that game a lot more drawn out and tougher in that second half. The margin for error in the playoffs is incredibly thin, but in a game like that, it is non-existent. So when you have an offensive miscue, when you have an execution error in the situation the Buccaneers did, it's going to cost you every single time. That one fumble was worth like 3 fumbles. There were plenty of reasons the Bucs lost the game. We're not going to point to one or the other. That's not what this show is about. But there were shortcomings on both sides of the ball for the Bucs in that playoff game, and like you said, they had a chance to step up on prime time, no less, and prove that they were a playoff team. And unfortunately, they couldn't get the job done. So here we are, 23-20 loss in the postseason to a rookie quarterback. The Buccaneers finished the year 10-8. And we go back to the question we posed at the beginning of the show, Evan. Have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers hit a ceiling with head coach Todd Bowles? What is your overall opinion on the season? And what is your outlook here for the head coach position before we talk about ultimately some of the other coaching change-ups and top playmakers as well? Let's not forget to get to that.
Yeah, I want to just get out in front of this. I do think the Bucs have probably hit their ceiling with Todd Bowles, and I mean, like let me say, like, okay, 10 wins is a successful season, right? They've had more, regular season wins, right? Because technically they had the same amount of wins, right, as they did last year as well. It was they had one playoff win, they won 9 games regular season, had one playoff win, but I just look at it and I don't know how much better than 10-7, maybe 11-6 you're gonna get. But like, do we see? Like you're not getting the 1 seed at 10-7 or 11-6, so you're gonna have to win at least 2 playoff games to get to the NFC title game. Do we really see a Todd Bowles led team winning 2 straight playoff games? I'm not sure if we do. Like I'm not sure if I have confidence in that. Let me just go out in front. If it were up to me, I would move on from Todd Bowles and promote Liam Coen. I don't think Coen is a guy they can afford to lose. Now, this isn't what I think will happen. This is what I would personally do. If they do let Liam Coen go, I think it is a massive mistake. And I will react accordingly to that. That podcast, if they let Liam Coen go, you will hear my honest thoughts on the Bucs organization. But I don't think Todd Bowles is a bad coach. I think he is an average coach. And I don't know, and I understand the accomplishments are there, but there are multiple reasons that I think you can't let something go when it's there. And I just think Liam Coen has the opportunity to be special. And is there a risk? Yes, because you know what you have in Todd Bowles, right? Like he is the known commodity. Liam Cohen's kind of the unknown, right? Great offensive coordinator, but we don't know. Like we've seen it all the time. Great offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators, they become head coaches. And it's not the same, right? It's not the same thing. But at the same time, you can't hit the home run if you don't swing the bat. So, like, you have to eventually take a swing. And, it feels like they're almost waiting for like the bottom to fall out here for Todd Bowles to. This is going to be, if Liam Coen departs, right? This would be Todd Bowles' fourth offensive coordinator. He's never had an OC for more than one season. And I understand Byron Leftwich, he inherited Leftwich, and so then he was able to hire his guy in Canales, and then Canales left, and then Coen. But to me, it's just gonna keep happening. Like, if he nails the next offensive coordinator hire, guess what? There's gonna be teams that have interest in hiring him as head coach. So eventually, when do you put your foot down? And I just think that, yes, while the Buccaneers have been successful, to me, the goal is a Super Bowl. And I don't see the Buccaneers getting to a Super Bowl with Todd Bowles as their head coach. So with that, I am willing to take the chance on a guy like Liam Coen potentially being the next Sean McVay, being the next Kyle Shanahan, being the next young, innovative offensive mind. I'm willing to take that chance because I just think that, again, eventually you got to swing. It's nothing against Todd Bowles personally. I think Todd Bowles is a good dude. I think he's a good leader, right? I think you've seen that, right? Because 4-6, the bottom could have fell out, right, of this team, but you're able to rally them, and you're able to find ways to keep motivating, right? Your troops basically. You lose 4 straight, and you're like, oh man, like it's dire times here. And a lot of people say, well, Liam Coen doesn't have experience. He's called plays at Kentucky. He called a little bit of plays at the Rams. And obviously he has a year of playing, calling plays at Tampa. He's also 1 year older than Sean McVay. He is older than Sean McVay. So how much of a risk did the Rams take? Ask the Rams if they regret hiring Sean McVay. Right. So that was a huge risk too. And it could not work out. It definitely could, but I'm willing to take the chance. So if it were up to me, I would personally, I would maybe not, maybe not say fire Todd Bowles. Look, do we honestly think that Bruce Arians just decided one day I'm going to hang him up? No, no. It could be something very similar to that, and that's what I would do.
Don't open that can of worms again. I thought we closed it and put it away.
It's just that's. I mean, that's. Do we really think he just retired? Like, no. Like, So I think that's what it could be for Todd Bowles. Now again, do I think that's what it'll be? I still think odds are that Bowles is back. But if I was running the team, that's what I would do.
I completely understand a lot of your sentiments. I understand the potential that Liam Coen really has to be the next generational offensive coach in the NFL. Like, that is the new breed of successful coaches in the NFL, I believe, are the guys that you can draw comparisons to Sean McVay and all these other younger coaches across the NFL. Matt LaFleur in Green Bay making the most of that situation. I know there's a lot of conversations about Jordan Love right now, but LaFleur has done a great job regardless.
That's another one. Yeah, and you look at Sean McVay's coaching tree, right? Kevin O'Connell is another coach that was on McVay's coaching tree. We have a 199 super chat from I don't even want to say the name, but 199 super chat from Anonymous. Where the heck is Scout the dog? He said dog like that.
She's ignoring me. I tried to call her a few times. I muted my mic to see if she'd come and get on camera. She does not feel like getting on camera today. So I apologize, James, Mr. Bucks Nation. We appreciate your $2.99 super chat. Thank you, James. But back to the point. I don't believe the Bucs should fire Todd Bowles. I believe that Todd Bowles should come back for another season because of the injuries on defense and because of certain things that we had talked about. 3 straight division titles as head coach. Has made the playoffs every year.
One of those titles.
In one of those titles
with a losing record. So.
I understand. I completely understand. I do completely understand. I will not dare be the person to make the comparison to Tony Dungy because a lot of people want to make that comparison. It's already been out there. People feel like, Todd Bowles is getting this team to the postseason, but they need someone else to get him over the hump. Todd Bowles has never gotten this team past the NFC Championship game. So he hasn't ever gotten them to the NFC Championship game. They've never been out of the divisional round. Tony Dungy consistently had an elite defense. Tony Dungy was never cut down because of his defense and their execution on the field. It was never a question. The standard was what the standard was. It was never brought into question.
Dungy was a defensive guy.
He was a defensive guy. The players liked him. Now, I know the players like Bowles, but it's a business. It's about winning games. It's not about being likable in the locker room. So I agree that I believe the Tampa Bay Buccaneers have hit their ceiling with Todd Bowles. I don't have any reason to believe that they can get past the divisional round. I would love to see them in the NFC Championship game. And the reason I think Bowles deserves another year is because this team, man, is right there. The roster is right there.
But you just said you just said you think they hit their ceiling.
I know. It's a
the
tough
goal,
place
the
that
goal
Bowles
is to win the
finds
Super
himself
Bowl.
in too. I think Bowles is getting a tough shake. I think Bowles is getting a tough shake, to be honest with you. I think it's a tough situation. It really is, because it could go either way. There is so much ammo on either side of the argument.
Mm-hmm.
I completely understand both sides of the argument. But when we look at a team like Detroit, who all season, they were great. They got the 1 seed in the NFC. People expected them to run over Washington, despite the injuries they had on the defensive side of the ball. We were told all year that, the Lions are making their defense work, and that's a defense full of backups. And then they
won 15 games, though.
They did, and then they got embarrassed by a rookie quarterback.
Still won 15 games.
Yeah, I mean, we were told defensive injury shouldn't be an excuse for Todd Bowles all year because teams like Detroit were able to find ways to overcome them. But after that loss for Detroit, the first thing that I hear from their fan base is, it was because of all the injuries. So which one is it? Pick one.
Well,
I
for
think
sure.
Bowles deserves another year because I think this roster is right there. And to be completely honest with you, I would like to see what happens with the Buccaneers this season if they never lose Chris Godwin and if they have a premier edge rusher, if they have a difference maker as an edge rusher. I don't give a shit about the linebacker position. Lavonte David was solid this year. I know he slowed down. I don't know if he's going to come back next year.
It was pretty bad.
Inside linebacker is definitely something they need to address. Servassier Dennis, losing him to injury was absolutely brutal. He looked okay before he went down. But God damn it, dude. I want to see the Buccaneers get aggressive in free agency. I want to see them retain the coaching staff. I want to see Liam Coen come back. I want to see Baker Mayfield get consistency with an offensive coordinator who just helped him throw 41 touchdowns.
Here's the thing, though.
The Bucs have a run game, Evan. If you get a defense that can get a sack on third down and get you off of the field, if you get a Max Crosby, if you get a Myles Garrett, if you get a Micah Parsons, if you go out on a limb in free agency and you just lock down an elite edge rusher, I feel like this team, with what they have shown, have you not said with me at times this season, when the Bucs are on, dude, they look like fucking world beaters. They look like they can beat anybody.
Sure.
So with the offense being what it is, if you have carryover into next year and the offense remains what it is, it remains a top 5 scoring unit in the NFL. And you get an edge rusher that can at least bump up the sack total a little bit, make a fucking play and get them off of the field when they need to get off of the field and prevent these 9, 10, 11-minute drives.
It's not going to remain what it is. You know why? Because Liam Cohen's going to be coaching the Jaguars. That's why.
I
Like
think
it's not going to
people
be.
don't have their panties in as much of a wad as they do if the Bucs win 11 games this year. If they win that game against Dallas, I think people are
And they still
not
get bounced in the
bitching
first
at
round?
all
They still
about
get
Todd
bounced in the first
Bowles
round.
in the future at head coach,
They don't win a
especially
playoff
when
game.
they know that this roster is only a couple of pieces away on the defensive side of the ball to be much better than it is now.
Again, though, you said it yourself. You think they've hit a ceiling with this guy. So what's it going to change? I agree that they need more talent.
I just think he needs a fair
agree.
shake. But I think he needs a fair
agree.
shake. And I'm sorry, I'll say this and then I'll let you go. I apologize. I'm going on a tangent
You're
here.
good, you're good.
I believe that Bowles deserves a fair shake. But if Liam Coen is about to take that job,
Yeah.
or it plays out the way that it is. I believe the best interest of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers would be to take preventative measures to stop Liam Coen from going elsewhere. But my gut says the most likely scenario, Todd Bowles is back as head coach, Liam Coen is back as his offensive coordinator.
I see. My gut is Todd Bowles is back as head coach, but Liam Cohen is not back as his offensive coordinator. And at the end of the day, you could say, well, the Glazers should just pay him whatever it takes to keep him stay. I mean, that's tough to turn down a head coaching job, right? Those don't come often, right? Those offers, those opportunities. I mean, even like you're still asking him to take. He probably wouldn't get paid the same amount, right?
You're right.
And you're like the head coach. You're running the football team. Like that's tough to turn. Even if the Glazers say like, look, blank check or whatever you need, that's tough to turn down still, right? There's only 32 of those jobs in the world. Um, I do think that the defense needs more talent, right? And that's on Jason Light to find that.
Absolutely. One of the things that we critiqued coming into the year was, listen, they need help in free agency. They got to target some veteran, at least some depth.
Sure. And I do think that if the Buccaneers will not make this move if they feel that Liam Cohen is not going to take the Jaguars job. They are not going to just fire Todd Bowles if Liam Cohen's not going to take that Jaguars job, right? So and maybe the best case scenario for the Bucs is that the whole coaching staff stays, right? Maybe that is because I do think the defense, if healthy and with a little bit more talent, should naturally improve a little bit at least, right? It should just naturally improve. That being said, if I feel this team's hit a certain ceiling, no matter what, like we remember they were fairly healthy in 2023, right? That was something we talked about where they didn't have much depth, right? And they couldn't really afford many injuries. They stayed fairly healthy and they still won just 9 games. So eventually, right, push has to come to shoves. We have $5 super chat from Aaron Flannery. Thank you very much, Aaron. Liam is great, but what about Bucky? What about how Bucky brought this team from last to top 5 in the run game? He benefits from not having an historically bad run game. Yes, at the same time, though, when you look at the film, part of the reason that the Bucs run game has so why is just one player getting all the credit and not the coach who's designing those runs? He is part of the reason, right? Him and the staff that he brought on. I think he's done a tremendous job. There's a reason that he's getting legit head coaching buzz, right? So, and again, I'm not saying that Todd Bowles is a bad coach. I'm basically saying that I think Cohen is special enough to where I'm willing to take that risk. And it is a risk. And I'm sure it's going to alienate some players, maybe, right? You'll get over it. You're grown men. Some coaches, the players are talking about they were not happy with the Dungy thing, right? And then Gruden comes in, and you trade all these draft picks, and you give all this money for this guy, and like I remember Warren Sapp saying hey, I'm expecting him to walk in and be this great dude or whatever. It's a small dude. I'm like, we gave away all this stuff for this. Like, I'm sure they were not happy. They got over it though. They won a Super Bowl. I'm not saying that's what would happen if the Buccaneers moved on from Todd Bowles and hired Liam Cohen, but to me, it's something I'm willing to take the chance. A lot of people, and I've seen a lot of guys, the Pewter Report guys, right, have said, I believe they asked a mail or like a roundtable question of should, not will, but should should Todd Bowles return as Bucs head coach? And nearly every single one of them, right, Scott Reynolds, Matt Matera, who we had on the show, Josh Capo, Sly, every single one of them, Bailey Adams, every single one of them said yes with Liam Cohen. And I brought that up because you said something very similar to that Bowles should be back with Liam Coen. Now, I want to get your opinion, your honest opinion. What would you do if Liam Coen is ready to take that Jacksonville Jaguars job?
I said it earlier when I was in the middle of my yelling fit, which I will apologize for. That wasn't complete. That wasn't anger at you. I just wanted to make sure. I just wanted to make sure I said what I needed to say.
It's a good discussion. It's a good discussion.
Yeah, we encourage that. I am all for the Buccaneers taking. I refer to it as preventative measures. If he is ready to take that job, and it's either I'm being a head coach in Jacksonville or I'm a head coach in Tampa, then I do agree with a lot of what you said. I think the landscape of the NFL right now, the position the Buccaneers are in where they just need to get over that hump, I think Coen has the potential to be one of those guys. And I think I would, without a doubt, be in favor for it. I think that is something the Buccaneers have to do. I believe I've said it before on this show. Liam Coen has to be back with the Bucs in 2025, no matter what. So a lot of the points that I've made about Todd Bowles coming back, going back to what you had just referred on the Pewter Report roundtable there, if Todd Bowles is back with Liam Coen, then I'm all for it. But Liam Coen is the X factor here. The Bucs cannot let him leave the organization no matter what. You can send Todd Bowles packing. You can send him on his way, or you can caveat it and you can, guarantee Coen the coaching job in a year or two, because Todd Bowles, I think, is the second oldest active coach now in the NFL. I
believe, actually, I was looking this up the other day. He's either third or fourth.
Right. Early 60s.
And he has said that he does not envision himself coaching till 70. So, if you want me, here's another prediction I'll make. If this scenario happens, put whatever, best case scenario, whatever you think. If Todd Bowles and Liam Coen are both back, right, and the Buccaneers have similar success in 2025, I think Liam Coen is the Bucs head coach in 2026. I don't foresee Todd Bowles coaching much longer. And I think if they have another good year, I think eventually, because then, if they have another good year, especially on the offensive side of the ball, you're going to lose them. You're going to lose Liam Coen. So I think that if they are both back, that means in 2026, Liam Coen will become the Bucs head coach. That's just a prediction.
Now, let me ask you this. And this is, this forecast, this 2025 outlook, if you will, is under the assumption that this coaching staff and this roster comes back largely the same. Maybe a couple of players added in free agency. Maybe they get that flashy edge rusher, or they get a linebacker in free agency. Truthfully, I don't think they need to make any major moves in the secondary. People have said that throughout the show. Jamel Dean is maybe a discussion we will have at some point. Maybe not today, but I think the more pressing matter is getting pressure on the quarterback. The secondary, when it's healthy, has a lot of playmakers back there. So let's just assume that this team is back next year, and they are able to address the pieces they need to address with a healthy roster. There's a lot of chatter about the expectation being the Super Bowl for Tampa Bay. Todd Bowles said it. He's proud of the progress and some of the things they were able to do in 2024, but the ultimate goal is the Super Bowl. A lot of people would argue that with this roster, if they address what they need to, if they get a playmaker on the defensive side of the ball. Evan, I am not 100% convinced the Bucs are in a position to not trade their first-round pick. I know that you're more of the draft guy than I am, but wouldn't that be awesome if Jason Light just went scorched earth, traded the first-round pick, and got Micah Parsons at 25 years old? Would that not kick ass?
So here's the problem. It's going to cost way more than just one first round. It's probably 2 or 3 first-round picks. Yeah. That's the issue.
And when you look at the draft success that Jason Light has had, I know that obviously that's a strength of his, without a doubt. And we'll get into some playmakers here too. But Super Bowl window, is that a legitimate thing? Do you think that if this team stays healthy and they get a playmaker on the defensive side of the ball, could they make it to the NFC title game? Could they legitimately go on a run here, especially with Baker Mayfield, who we haven't talked about a ton, playing some of the best ball of his career? It feels like this team is right there, man.
Yeah. So here's the thing. When when you're talking about Max Crosby, Micah Parsons, Myles Garrett, there's two things, right? One, the prices to acquire those players, I think, would be very high. Okay, all three of those players, I believe, are under contract for multiple seasons
I
still.
think it would be worth it. I think when you look at how this team is built, what Jason Light has done with the roster and homegrown talent, and what their shortcomings have been these last multiple seasons, Jason Light can't draft an edge rusher to save his life. Yaya Diaby had a pretty damn good year 1 and year 2, showed development, but I still think they need another piece, and I would go out on a limb, and I would mortgage at least a little bit for a stud-ass pass rusher. I think that would take this defense to the next level. That's just one man's opinion.
Well, and here's the second, and I think the most important thing. There's been zero indications by all three of those teams that those players are actually available. Like there hasn't. So if they don't make them available, like, sorry, like there's nothing. That's not the Bucs' fault, right? Like there's nothing they can do. Like if they don't make them available. Now, I'll throw some people a bone here. I have a name that I would think the Buccaneers should be interested in trading for, and it is a name that I think could logically be dealt. Now, we say, oh, the Bucs, need to trade their first round pick for an edge rusher. Not necessarily, okay? Let's not forget Jason Light traded his third round pick for Jason Pierre-Paul. I think we could see something maybe similar to that this offseason. Or, signing a free agent, whatever. But I have one trade guy. I know a lot of people are going to bring up Trey Hendrickson. I'm not sure about that. But I have one trade guy that I think have been thinking about the last couple of days. I looked up his contract and everything. And I just think the situation that this particular organization is in, I wonder if he could be had. And if he could, I'd have some interest. That's Harold Landry from the Tennessee Titans. He is, I believe, 29 years old. There's 2 years left on his deal. Has a pretty high cap hit. You'd probably want to restructure it. But had 9 sacks last year, 10 and a half the year before. That's somebody to where I think could be had for a day 2 pick, maybe a second or a third round pick. The Titans just fired their GM. New GM might come. Mike Borgonzi now, is the head man there. He might come in and say, "Look, yeah, we want to move on. We want to get younger here, right? We want to move on." I wonder if I'm Jason Light, like I would look to the free agency market, right? But if the trade market, I don't think Crosby or Garrett or Parsons are becoming available. But I think a guy like Harold Landry could be potentially available, not cost you as much as those other guys, and still come in and get you 9 to 12 sacks in a season. And I think that could be a pretty big difference maker there.
Yeah, I think that's what's holding them back is difference maker, exactly what you said. Give me a difference maker in the edge rush room. You got all of your pressure from the interior. Vita Vea and Kalijah Kancey. Vita Vea for the next 2 years, I would say, is going to be playing at the highest level of his career, right? After that, it's going to be a discussion of how long can he keep doing it for. Because he's been around that long now, believe it or not. Got to give Logan Hall a little bit of credit. He stepped up, 5.5 sacks for him. Had a pretty strong finish to the year. That could be a discussion depending on, if he has a market or not. Maybe he's cheap depth for the Bucs to bring back, but have to give him credit. Kalijah Kancey going to continue to develop and wreak havoc. Hopefully Yaya Diaby continues to develop and wreak havoc. But nobody else in that outside linebacker room was worth a damn in 2024, in my opinion. Overhaul the entire thing. Get rid of Anthony Nelson. Like
I would keep Nelson as depth, but
depth. But
yeah.
You certainly.
No, I'm not saying a starter. But here's the thing. Like the Bucs can acquire Harold Landry or they can acquire Max Crosby but their pass rush at the end of the day, and some people may not want to hear this, they're not going to go out and acquire 3 or 4 different edge rushers and 2 or 3 linebackers and 2 and 3 corners. Some of these guys are just simply going to have to play better, right? Sure. Yaya Diaby he's finished the season strong.
I think Servassier Dennis being healthy next year is going to be a huge factor as well. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
Yeah, no, you're like Yaya Diaby is going to need to develop, play better. Right, he's probably going to be a starter. Like I think they're going to acquire one starting caliber edge guy. Like I don't think it's going to be 2. Like you're not going to see a completely different defense next year. So Yaya Diaby's going to have to keep developing. Kalijah Kancey, Logan Hall, those guys are probably starters. And Kalijah Kancey obviously is a starter, but Logan Hall's probably a starter. He's got to play, keep developing. Zion McCollum. This team is not going to get two more corners this offseason. I do think there's a chance, and we'll talk about, again, we're not going to dive into the full offseason yet because we have an entire offseason to talk about this. But Jamel Dean might be moved on from. They're not going to sign 2 or 3 starting corners. So, like, Zion McCollum is going to have to keep developing. Like, so it's not all going to be just revamped with these veterans and these draft picks. They're going to have to rely on who they already have continuing to develop and play better, too. That's part of it.
No, you're right. It probably was a little short-sighted to say Anthony
And-
Nelson. I think just
and-
the
well,
price of
and-
that contract is what a lot of people are going to look at when you look at his
I think
production.
he's a free agent, so I think that the contract might be a little cheaper now. And lead us in the chat even said, Chris Braswell. Chris Braswell was a second-round pick last year. Like, he's another guy who needs to continue to develop. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, I think for the people expecting, 5, 6, 7 new starters on the defense, I think you're going to be disappointed.
Now, let's just dive into some top playmakers here for the Buccaneers on both sides of the football. Some of the top storylines on the roster this year. First and foremost, the 2024 rookie class for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Graham Barton starting week 1. Jalen McMillan catches a touchdown week 1. Bucky Irving, Bucs' first 1,000-yard rusher in a decade. Tyke Smith, when he was on the field at times, was very effective. The Buccaneers defense could not buy a takeaway at times this season, and Tyke Smith was a source of quite a few of those for the Buccaneers defense. Devin Culp, I know we only saw a very, very small sample size of Devin Culp, but some promising things ahead, and then we just talked about Chris Braswell, but let me get your thoughts on this rookie class here. Again, Graham Barton, Jalen McMillan with 7 touchdowns in his rookie season, one of the most productive rookie wide receiver seasons we have seen in a very long time since Mike Evans, dare I say it, matches the touchdown record for Buccaneers rookies with Mike Evans and Jimmy Giles. So again, 7 touchdowns for Jalen McMillan, man. One of the most effective rookie classes in a very long time, and dare I say the best of Jason Light's tenure as Bucs GM?
I mean, it's up there. We talk about, I think, 2015. Like, yeah, I know it looked better in 2015 because you still had, Winston or whatever. But like, drafts Ali Marpet, drafts Quan Alexander in the 4th round. Was pretty productive there.
Who's still playing? Wouldn't you know it? Quan Alexander was bouncing around on a few teams this year. So I mean, say what you will about the guy, he's made a career of it.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, 2018 is a pretty good one. You got Vita Vea, Carlton Davis. 2019 ended up being pretty good. I mean, 2020, I mean, drafting Tristan Santo Jr. is, that's 2 home runs right there. Yeah, so I mean, it's up there though, for sure. And I mean, the last 2 years have been like, you've seen that in 2023 and in 2024, the Bucs, like, their rookie classes have really saved them, honestly. I mean, last year, Kalijah Kancey played well, Yadi Diaby played well, Trey Palmer even played well, and then, Cody Malk, played well at times. But then, yeah, this year, like you mentioned. So I do think it's close, I think, between 2020, just because, yeah, it's only 2 guys, but like just how good Wirfs and Winfield were immediately.
Yeah.
That's tough.
I also wanted to highlight some of those second-year players. You already mentioned a few of them, but the development, guys like Kalijah Kancey leading the team in sacks. Yaya Diaby was pretty good on pressure this year. You'd like to see more sacks, but, he showed signs of development this year. Cody Malk, the jump from year 1 to year 2 has been awesome for number 69. And then Payne Durham even getting involved in the pass game towards the end of the regular season. These are all guys in their second season who are going to continue to be around the team, at least for the next couple of years, as this young core group of players. You'll love to see them step up.
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, I mean, this is the next, group or whatever. And this was, the last 2 seasons, right? Now is the off season where I know we have a couple people in the chat that swear that I guess Jason Light just does nothing. But this is the off season where I will say that I think Jason Light needs to be a little bit more active, in free agency and stuff. People don't realize, like, your free agency, the healthiest organizations and the best organizations don't make splashes year after year, right? Occasionally, you'll see the Ravens sign a Derrick Henry or this and that because you're not making splashes because you're spending all your cap space re-signing your own guys. And the Buccaneers have been able to do that. Now, this season, though, they do have some opportunity with a lot of dead cap off the books. They have more opportunities to, I think they have like a little over 20 million projected right now. They have an opportunity to, if they want to get it up like over 80 million in cap space. So like, yeah, there's an opportunity there for them to spend. But having the rookie class definitely helps as well. Wow, we have a $20 super chat from Realtor David Sussman. Thank you very much. He says, I would restructure all big contracts to create 88 million in cap. Would sign Chase Young and Byron Murphy Jr. Would trade Jamel Jean with the Steelers for Nick Herbig. Would sign Jack Gibbons and Sherwood, Hufanga and Dahlman. So I mean, he's making a lot of moves there, all in the
There's the battle
defensive side of the
plan.
ball. Yeah, that is a battle plan. But I mean, look, like, and I think the Buccaneers could look to do some of that stuff right now. Obviously, the trade, we don't know if the Steelers have any interest in Jamel Dean. We don't know if any teams do have interest in Jamel Dean. The Bucs may just have to end up cutting him. But thank you very much for the super chat, David. Again, and this is stuff like we're gonna be talking. We're not gonna spend too deep into battle plans or free agents or anything like that because again, we have an entire. We're only in January, right? Like we have an entire rest of January, entire month of February, and part of March to discuss this stuff. So appreciate the super chat, and yeah, we'll have to wait and see what they do. But they could be, I think they will be more active than in years past.
Yeah, thank you again, Realtor Dave Zussman. We truly appreciate your support with the $20 super chat. Let's wrap up with some of the biggest playmakers for Tampa Bay on the season. Big stars making big plays is really what it boils down to. We got a lot of that this season for the Buccaneers. First and foremost, the quarterback position, Baker Mayfield. After 2023, the Buccaneers pay him peanuts, take a gamble on what would ultimately become their next franchise quarterback. Baker had a chance to follow up the hype and prove that it wasn't a fluke and that he deserved the $100 million contract from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And his regular season looks like this: 4,500 yards, which was third in the NFL, 41 touchdowns through the air, which was tied for second in the NFL, 16 interceptions, which was tied for first in the NFL, which is interesting because I guess in the grand scheme of his season, the production and the efficiency of the offense, that's not really being talked about a lot. At this point, it's just become part of Baker's game. Maybe we can do an episode where we break down all 16 of those picks and decide which one of those were his fault and which one weren't, like we did with another quarterback in years past. But regardless, it was a really strong year for Baker Mayfield, and I think he got a lot more people to buy in. I think for another year in a row, he showed exactly why it is so easy to root for the guy. Even in a playoff game, he takes off running on 3rd and 9, lowers his shoulder like he's Mike Allstott, runs over 2 defensive players and picks up some more yardage, lights a fire up under his teammates. He's just wakes up every day with a chip on his shoulder, and I think that's the identity that this Buccaneers team and fan base can resonate with for right now. But Baker proving that the Buccaneers, in my opinion, made the right move with him as their QB.
He has an interesting season coming up because I think if he plays well again, I think you're going to see an extension in the 2026 offseason because I don't think the Buccaneers would have him going into a contract year. I like it. That would be the last year of his deal. I don't. It's sort of like a coach, right? Like a lot of times when you have a lame duck head coach, it's like the Cowboys and Mike McCarthy. All season it was his contract expires at the end of the year.
Yeah.
A lot of times you'll see a team give a coach an extension, right? So I think you could, if Baker Mayfield plays well again, I think you could see an extension for Baker Mayfield next offseason, not this one. But next offseason. So we'll see. Yeah, but I mean, yeah, he played, he played the career year. I mean, I have a positional review, that'll be coming out sometime this week on the quarterback, so the whole quarterback room. And he talked about Mayfield, and he actually hit a career well above a career high in rushing yards. So while he had a career year, he also used his legs to his advantage as well. So obviously he's going to need to cut down on the turnovers. Had 13 total fumbles, not all of them lost, but 13 fumbles and 16 picks. So like, he's going to need to cut down on those for sure. But I mean, still, that sort of comes with the territory a little bit. Like when you're throwing 41 touchdowns, you're going to throw a lot of picks too. Like the pick numbers are going to be up as well. That's you take the good with the bad there.
2 full seasons of Baker Mayfield as Buccaneers quarterback. Evan, I need to ask you, and just for the sake of the argument, we don't have to get into this nearly as much as we got into the Todd Bowles discussion, but there is still a lot of scuttlebutt among Buccaneers fans that Baker Mayfield may not be the guy fit for the job. A lot of people feel like the Bucs can't win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield, and they feel like maybe Baker has a ceiling as an NFL quarterback. I didn't see any evidence of that this season. I really thought that I don't know. I didn't see many. I didn't see much evidence of that argument, but I'm curious your take on it. And Baker is ultimately, is he the guy for the job? Can the Buccaneers win a Super Bowl with Baker Mayfield? Is what I'm asking you.
It's a loaded question at the end here.
Yeah.
So there's a difference, right? Is it single-handedly? Like, can Baker Mayfield carry the Buccaneers to the Super Bowl? No, I don't think he can. Can Baker Mayfield be the quarterback of the Buccaneers when they make the Super Bowl? Maybe. Like Brad Johnson. Brad Johnson wasn't carrying the Buccaneers to a Super Bowl. That wasn't happening. But he was the quarterback of the Buccaneers when they went to the Super Bowl. Trent Dilfer with the Ravens. He didn't carry that team to a Super Bowl. So Rex Grossman playing a freaking Super Bowl with the Bears. Like there has been some bad QBs that have like some journeymen that have played in Super Bowls. Blake Bortles was one win away from going to a Super Bowl.
Remember Case Keenum?
Yeah, Case, same thing. Like, so can he be on a Super Bowl team with the Bucs when he's the quarterback? Yes. Can he be the one to carry them to it? I don't believe so. And like I said, I just, and that's not a knock on Baker. I think because you have to be somewhat good enough. Like you look at Rex Grossman, you look at like Case Keenum was awesome that year with Minnesota. It wasn't like Case Keenum was bad, and like Blake Bortles was great for Jacksonville that year. Like it's not like these quarterbacks were just playing awful. Like yeah, like okay, it was Peyton Manning, but like the Broncos, Peyton Manning got carried to that final Super Bowl, right? Like they had Brock Osweiler in there, and like it was their defense. So like the supporting cast, I think around Baker needs to be good. I don't think Baker can carry them to one, no, but I do think he can be in a Super Bowl. Which, to be fair, if you asked me that 2 years ago, I would have said no for either
Yeah,
one.
I was gonna say he's made some progress because I know that 2 years ago your opinion of Baker is not what it is now. I will say that I agree with what you're saying, but in a different way. I do agree that like Baker isn't going to be the Tom Brady of any football team, especially not the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But I mean, he just shattered his career best in everything. 41 touchdowns is nothing to sneeze at. He's made his way into the Tampa Bay Buccaneers history books after 2 seasons. So I think that, yes, he can be the quarterback on the team to win the Super Bowl. I don't think he nearly needs to be carried as much as some of those guys he talked about. I think to compare him to like Trent Dilfer, and with all due respect to Big Bad Brad, he had a Hall of Fame defense on the other side. Right. He wasn't on a top 5 scoring offense. I think Baker deserves a little bit more credit, but I understand what you're saying, and I do agree with the concept of what you said, and I'll leave it at that. But, I mean, you give him an all-star edge rusher and a defense that can get the fuck off the field on third down, the Buccaneers might be playing in the NFC Championship game.
Well, I mean, with one more... I'm gonna save this.
Oh,
actually,
go on. Well, I mean, we're an hour 10 into it.
We got all right, really quick.
Do it.
A lot of people want to say, like, I agree, like the Bucs defense needs the talent, right? But you say, oh, they need to get off the field or whatever. Like, the scheme matters too. Like, and whose scheme is it?
You're right.
Just saying.
You're right. The injuries matter too. And this is all stuff that, we've tried to factor into the argument. I love the takes in chat. We got a lot of participation. Leave some comments if you're watching this after the fact. We truly do appreciate you guys hanging out with us. A couple more players to wrap up with. Mike Evans, the wide receiver, on this season gets his 1,000 yards. Barely, but gets his 1,000 yards. 74 receptions, 1,004 yards, 11 touchdowns for Mike Evans, who joins Jerry Rice as the only other player in NFL history to have 11 straight 1,000-yard seasons. We've talked time and time again about Mike Evans, but put this year in perspective for Big Mike, who missed 4 games.
Yeah, it was a really good year because, like you said, I mean, basically, I think he missed 3 games, basically missed 4, right? Because got injured early in that Baltimore game. If he plays in even like 2 of those games, like he gets over 1,000 yards easily, right? Like he would have already had it before that Saints game. So he had a good year. I mean, and it was and obviously I think losing Godwin helps Evans, because like then like Evans becomes like the main dude. Because if you remember, like before Godwin went down, Godwin was on pace to have like an incredible year. Like, and it's a shame for Godwin that he got hurt, but I think the injury is what's gonna most likely keep him in Tampa Bay. Because I think if he would have stayed healthy, I don't know if the Bucs would have been able to afford him. But yeah, I thought Mike had a good year, and again, it's a shame that he missed that time, but he's missed time before, and he's still been able to hit 1,000 yards. So hopefully, he can keep the streak going next year.
Yeah, Chris Godwin was the next player on my list. You kind of hit the nail on the head there. Very strong season for him. Excited to hopefully see him back in some red and pewter. I think he can pick up right where he left off, man. Just a special player who, honestly, at this point in his career, has overcome a lot. Some of the other veteran stars stepping up for Tampa Bay. Cade Otton had a big-time year. We just talked about Chris Godwin going down. Cade Otton was really the first receiver to step up and take over some of these games. We were hoping at that time of the year it would have been Jalen McMillan, but Cade Otton, a huge step in his development this season. And then we will wrap it up on the defensive side of the ball. Vita Vea, obviously, one of the consistent highlights along that defensive line all season. Him and Kalijah Kancey, who we talked about earlier. Going to wrap it up with Lavonte David. Your outlook on Lavonte David. How did you think he played this season? I thought he played well. Again, a couple of the criticisms we had this year were mostly because there's certain things he just can't do as quickly as he used to. Some things come with age. And I hate to say it, but there was one week where we saw him kind of get picked on in coverage from an opposing quarterback, which really hasn't happened in his NFL career. But I would say for the grand scheme of things, for a 34-year-old linebacker in the NFL, he played pretty damn well. And it's a series of one-year contracts for him. How do you think he played this year? And do you think he comes back?
I thought he played fair, and especially because, like you said, is what it is. Like there's nothing you can do about it. Just age and ability, and he's better running downhill, right, than he is going backwards at this point, right? It's his coverage has not been. It's honestly, it's part of the reason why the Bucs linebackers struggled. Like obviously they couldn't really find an answer next to him, but he was part of the problems in coverage at times too. But yeah, still a pretty short tackler. His speed's still pretty good. Pursuit's still pretty good. His IQ is obviously up there, so he can still play. I have no doubt about that. I don't know what he's gonna do. Obviously, it's gonna be a 1-year deal if he does come back. If I had to bet, if you had a sports book in front of me and it was yes or no, and I had to put money down on one of them, will Lavonte David return? I would probably say no. Just sort of felt like that's it type of thing. Saw his post game press conference. You look in his eyes, and it kind of looks like a guy that just played his last NFL game. Again, and it's right after the season. Emotions run high. You have time to think about it, time to talk with your family, decompress. Things can change. But like I said, if I had to bet right now, I would say he doesn't return. I think he retires. But it wouldn't shock me. Like if he signs a 1-year deal, I'm not going to be like stunned. But if I had to bet, I would say that was probably it for Lavonte David, which obviously would open up, a pretty big hole for the Buccaneers to have to fill.
One of the best to ever do it for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And when you talk about a franchise with as much history on the defensive side of the ball as the Buccaneers have, I mean, all of our Hall of Famers are defensive players. You're talking about the likes of Derek Brooks. You're talking about Leroy Selman, Warren Sapp, Rondé Barber, John Lynch. These are all guys who at one time or another were like cornerstones of their position. Warren Sapp, Defensive Player of the Year. Derek Brooks was arguably the best middle linebacker in the NFL for however many years he was playing. he was regarded as one of the best. And I think Lavonte David, unfortunately, has been largely underrated throughout his career, but he is one of the best who ever put on a Buccaneers uniform. And with that being said, if this is his time and he decides to retire, then, it feels like time. Like you said, it feels like it would be a good time for him to retire just because
you don't want to become a shell of yourself.
you don't.
Right?
Like,
you don't want to go out there and start embarrassing yourself. And like we have to have the conversation mid-season next year of like Lavonte David is bad. Like you don't want to become that, right? And I think that's part of the reason why Brady could have played another year. Like he could, like ability wise, he had the ability to do it, but like he didn't want to become like one of those quarterbacks that like, yeah, this dude is staying way too long. Like you are awful now.
Could you imagine if Tom Brady had a Bucky Irving in 21 or 22?
I mean, 21. I mean, they were so good already. I mean,
Yeah,
but 22
but,
would help. But again, that run game schematically was awful. So scheme matters. That's what I'll say.
Right. You're right. I also feel like Lavonte David retires. If he does come back, I would be in favor of it. I do think that he is a better option than some of the options that would be on the table if he retires. Between the draft and free agency, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. Servassier Dennis hopefully going to be back and starting for the entire season next year. Excited to see what he can develop into for Tampa Bay. But if Lavonte's gone, then farewell to a great career. And again, farewell to one of the best to ever do it in a Buccaneers uniform. He deserves all of the credit in the world. And I really, really, really hope to see him in the NFL Hall of Fame one day. I think that's going to become a Rondé Barber thing for at least a little while. But we'll see. We'll see. A lot of other NFL players do have a lot of respect for Lavonte David.
Yep.
Evan, I think that's going to do it for today's season review show of the 2024 Tampa Bay Buccaneers season. Almost an hour and a half, and we crammed in a lot today. Final thoughts here is now we shift our gears into the offseason.
Yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of questions, right? A lot of questions that need answers about how the Bucs are going to improve this team. First thing that we're going to probably be talking about this offseason is the offensive coordinator, right? Because I think you're going to receive your answer on what Liam Coen's fate is, whether he's back at the Bucs as offensive coordinator, whether he's the Jaguars head coach, or if, the Bucs decide to pull the trigger and he's the head coach of the Bucs. So we'll have to wait and see what that. I think that's coming sooner rather than later. You're going to see your answer on that, probably within the next week. I would say. So we could be talking to you guys pretty soon. But yeah, I mean, stick around for the whole offseason coverage. Just because the offseason doesn't mean we're going to be stopping. Like I said, we had the positional reviews that are going to be sprinkled out here throughout the month of January and then probably a little bit into February. But then, yeah, anytime there's breaking news, we'll, I mean, if it's breaking news and they re-sign Greg Gaines, it won't be an emergency podcast. But if there's big news, you can bet that we will be here talking about it.
Absolutely. Took a little bit of a break after that wild card loss. Just to, one, kind of eat the loss because that shit sucked. But two, just, shift gears, refresh, and get ready for an offseason full of coverage, as Evan had said. Follow the show on social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. All of those are Cannon Fire Podcast. Best place to go for updates on the show. And, of course, Tampa Bay Buccaneer news as it happens. Speaking of Bucs news as it happens, you can follow my co-host, Evan Wanish, on Instagram at Bucs_Daily. And you can also find him on Twitter at EvanNFL and check out his written work at BucsNation.com. Have you got anything coming up here over the next few weeks?
Yeah, I'm going to be, like I said, grading I haven't got to it yet, so grading the Bucs rookie class after seeing them for a full rookie season. So I did, right post-draft, I did, the grading the picks, right? But obviously we don't know how these guys are going to play. Now, after we've seen them play, I'm going to be grading the picks again, sort of a revised thing. So I'm happy to do that. And then just, chugging along, right? Might do like free agent priority stuff, here and there, whatever, periodically. Not gonna be as much of a schedule now. That the off season's here, but any breaking news we'll have covered for you guys here on the YouTube channel for Cannon Fire Podcast. If you guys are listening on audio, we appreciate it, especially if you're listening this long. We know it's a longer show, but again, gonna have those positional reviews out. Gonna have a couple other things out. Maybe some more like This will probably be more towards like May and June when it's really slow, but more so like fun stuff maybe like I'd like to do like tier lists or stuff like that just to get the people talking basically. So a lot more to come this offseason with the free agency, the draft and everything. So stay tuned for all that good stuff.
It's provocative. It gets the people going.
That's
Yeah,
right.
this is I would call this like no man's land. This is the part of the podcast that nobody listens to. But I tell you what, this doesn't apply to our live audience. Unfortunately, if you're watching live on YouTube, you cannot win. But if you're listening to this and you've listened as of right now an hour and a half up until this point, send me a message on X or Twitter at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. And if you're into that, I will mail you some random cool Bucs card. I don't know what it would be yet. It's not going to be like an autograph or anything like that, but it would be something numbered. It would probably be something cool, some kind of insert. But yeah, if you're listening on the audio feed or you're watching after the fact on YouTube and a day or two has gone by, message me on social media at Redicus, RHETTAKUS. If you follow me, I will follow you back, Instagram or Twitter.
Some breaking news. I mean, it's not the Bucs, but it does maybe have something to do because Chicago is hiring Ben Johnson as their next head coach. So
Yeah.
the reason this pertains to the Bucs though is because the Jaguars were believed to have Ben Johnson very high on their list. It is believed that Liam Coen is number 2 on that list. So we will see.
Things could get spicy. Things certainly could shake up here over the next week or so. We will keep you updated every step of the way. Thank you to everybody for hanging out with us once again. Buck Wild, the moderator, holding it down. Brutal Ass Bucks here checking in at the very last minute. Was kind of waiting for you there the entire show. Had alluded to you a few times, but good to see you check in. Jared Cox, Richard T, Tom Bucks fan, Realtor Dave Zussman. Richard T on the West Coast.
That's cool.
Your NFC South champion, Leadus Productions, Aaron Flannery, the Baker's Man Card Gallery, who said that we are out of our minds because we did not give Baker Mayfield enough credit. Imagine that. Brandon Hollum. And let me make sure I get our super chats here. Bam! Aaron Flannery with a $5 super chat. And, of course, James Hill with a $1.99.
And Dave with the big one.
Absolutely. We can't forget Dave with the $20 super chat. Realtor Dave Zussman. Thank you guys once again. Should be an interesting week. Of course, we will keep you guys updated. We will talk to you in the next episode of the Cannon Fire Podcast. I'm your host, Rhett Matthews, signing off from my co-host, Evan Wanish. We'll see you next time. Until then, and as always, thank you for listening, and go Bucs.